I want to begin by saying a special thank you and a special acknowledgement to Captain Mendoza, who shared her testimony earlier this morning. Captain Mendoza is a native of Missouri and an alumna of Park University, if my memory serves. And I just want to say to her, I want to thank her for being here today, but also for her incredible bravery and courage on January 6th. And on behalf of the entire state of Missouri, I want to say thank you for what you have done. Thank you for what you represent. And I also want to take that opportunity to say again now, as I said on the night of that terrible day, a thank you to all of the law enforcement from all of our various branches who responded in this dire emergency to face these criminal rioters, these violent criminals, to repulse them from the Capitol and to secure this space so that the work of Congress could continue. So thank you, and a special thanks to Captain Mendoza from the state of Missouri. Mr. Sund, if I could just return to the question about the National Guard activation. I'm a little bit confused about the timeline here, and I want to ask you, Mr. Irving, some questions just so I can get this clear in my own head. I'm looking at your written testimony. You testified that you spoke with Mr. Irving at 1:09, actually both of the sergeants at arms, at 1:09 p.m. Now, I understand there's a little bit of dispute about the timeline here, but you do say that Mr. Irving advised you that he needed to run it, namely the request for the National Guard, he needed to run it up the chain of command. Have I got that right?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, Mr. Irving, could I just ask you, when Mr. Sund says that you told him you needed to run it up the chain of command, to whom were you referring there?
Senator, I do not recall a phone call at 1:09 when I was on the floor of the House during the Electoral College session. My phone records do not reflect a telephone call at that time. And had I received a call at that time, I had everyone with me. I had Mr. Stanger, leadership. We would have approved it immediately. So I have no recollection of that call, and neither do I have a record of it.
You say, I think, that you spoke with Mr. Sund later at approximately 1:30. Is that right?
That is correct, after I left the floor. And on that call, he had indicated to me that conditions were deteriorating and that he might be making a request at a later time.
Okay, and did you then say that you needed to run it up the chain of command, or words to that effect?
No, not to my recollection. I notified leadership, and I went to Michael Stanger's office to receive updates from Mr. Sund as to conditions outside and to determine whether he needed to make a request or not. And when the request was made, shortly after 2, we approved it.
And when you say we, who's we? We approved it.
I was in Michael Stanger's office, so next to Mr. Stanger.
And so you did not consult congressional leadership. You weren't waiting at any point for input from congressional leadership. Is that your testimony, Mr. Irving? Have I got that right?
Yes, I advised them, as we would do with many security protocols.
But you weren't waiting for them at any point. There was no delay, you're saying, in getting National Guard requests, because you didn't at any point actually wait for the input of the Speaker or the Majority Leader or anybody else.
No, absolutely not.
Mr. Sund, is that your recollection?
My recollection was at 1:09, while I was sitting in the command center watching things rapidly deteriorate, I made a phone call. The phone call was made in the presence of, I believe, both my assistant chiefs and possibly my general counsel, at which time I made the initial request that we need to activate the National Guard. The situation's bad on the West Front. I followed up at 1:22 to check on the status of the request.
Okay. One of the things I'm trying to get clear on here is who would constitute the chain of command. Now, it sounds like Mr. Irving is saying that he actually never made that statement and he didn't consult anybody else. I mean, my understanding is from the statute, 2 U.S.C. Chapter 29, Section 1970, that in an emergency situation, I would think that this would qualify, that the Capitol Police Board does not have to consult with members of the Senate or House leadership in order to make a request for deployment of the National Guard or a request of other executive departments and executive agencies. So it would seem strange to me that there was any talk about a chain of command that would involve anybody other than the Capitol Police Board, given the statute. But there seems to be some confusion about the basic facts and who asked for what when. Let me just ask you this, Mr. Sun. On Monday, January the 4th, you've testified that you approached the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms to request the assistance of the National Guard, and Mr. Irving stated that he was concerned about the optics of having the Guard deployed. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct, sir. On the 4th, it actually wasn't a phone call. It was an in-person visit over to his office where I went in and requested the National Guard.
And Mr. Irving, could you just clarify when you use the term optics, and maybe your recollection is you didn't, so maybe you could speak to that. Did you talk about being concerned about the optics of the National Guard? And then could you just elaborate on what you meant by that? Again, this is Monday, January the 4th now.
Yeah, on Monday, January the 4th, Senator, safety was always the deciding factor in making security plans. And the issue on the table was whether the intelligence warranted troops at the Capitol. And the conversation with Mr. Sun was not, I did not take it as a request. He was merely informing me that he had received an offer from the National Guard. And then when we included Mr. Stanger, the three of us discussed the specific issue as to whether the intelligence warranted the troops, and the answer was no. It was a collective answer, no. And then Mr. Stanger put forth his recommendation to have them on standby. And my recollection was Mr. Sun was very satisfied with that. In fact, he briefed the following day that he was satisfied, and I heard no concern anytime thereafter.
Were you concerned, this use of the word optics, the appearance, what it would look like to have the Guard, this is what Mr. Sun has testified was a concern on January 4th, that there was a reluctance to request assistance because of the appearance. Was there something that you were, what's the appearance that you were concerned about, Mr. Irving, if indeed you were? Were you concerned that having the Guard present would look like it was too militarized? Were you concerned about the criticism of the Guard being deployed in Washington during rioting earlier this summer, the summer of 2020? Would just give us some insight into your thinking there as you recall it.
Senator, I was not concerned about appearance whatsoever. It was all about safety and security. Any reference would have been related to appropriate use of force, display of force, and ultimately the question on the table when we look to any security asset is, does the intelligence warrant it? Is the security plan matched with the intelligence? And again, the collective answer was yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one final question?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you. Speaker Pelosi has asked retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore to lead an immediate review of Capitol security in light of the attack. The general has said that the leadership of the Capitol Police, that'd be you, Mr. Sun, and both of you gentlemen, the House and Senate Sergeants at Arms, he's criticized you for, and I'm quoting now, the appearance of complicity during the attack, and also said that you were potentially undertook complicit actions. Those are his words during the attack. Mr. Sun, were you complicit in this attack on January 6th?
Absolutely not, sir. I've heard those comments as well, and I think it's disrespectful to myself and to the members of the Capitol Police Department.
Mr. Stinger, were you complicit in the attacks on January 6th? Mr. Stinger, were you complicit in the attacks on January 6th?
He's asking you. Sure.
Mr. Irving, were you complicit in the attacks on January 6th?
Absolutely not, Senator.
Yeah, of course none of you were. There's absolutely no evidence to that effect. And Mr. Sun, I think your comments are appropriately taken to allege that any of you, were complicit in this violent mob attack on this building, I think is not only extremely disrespectful, it's really quite shocking. And this person has no business leading any security review related to the events of January 6th. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair.